Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Medina, and I am the State and Local Policy Manager at CFED, which is a nonprofit organization that empowers individuals and families to build and preserve assets. I'm joined today by Amy Williamson, who is the Special Project Coordinator at Mutual Housing California in Sacramento, and also Ethan Geiling from CFED, who will be monitoring your questions. I want to thank you all for joining today's webinar, and I particularly want to thank NeighborWorks America for supporting this webinar, which is the first in a series of 4 webinars that will focus on new ideas and approaches for NeighborWorks organizations to help your constituents and tenants build their assets. Before starting, there are a few housekeeping items I want to cover. The first is that this webinar will be recorded and will be available online, so diligent note-taking is not required. And all participants are muted to ensure sound quality. However, you can ask a question at any time by typing it into the text box of the GoToWebinar control panel. And we will be monitoring the questions throughout, answering the straightforward ones in writing, and then sharing the rest after the presentations. If you have any technical issues, you can email gotomeeting@cfed.org, and our team will help you out. So let's get started. Today's webinar is divided into 4 main parts. First, I'll share with you some of the research out there that talks about why assets are important for a family's social, economic, and psychological well-being. Then I will introduce you to the Assets and Opportunity Network, which is an emerging national movement-oriented collaboration of practitioners, policymakers, and others working to expand the reach and deepen the impact of asset-based strategies. Then we'll spend some time exploring the Assets and Opportunity Scorecard, which is CFED's signature resource on state-level outcome and policy data on how well residents are faring in terms of financial security. And finally, Amy Williamson from Mutual Housing of California, which is a NeighborWorks organization, will share with you why her organization decided to join the Assets and Opportunity Network and what their experience has been since joining. First, for those of you who are not familiar with CFED, CFED is a national organization that advances policies and strategies that allow families to pursue higher education, buy a home, start a business, and save for the future. Our approach is to identify good ideas, then we test them in collaboration with our partners and bring them to scale through a combination of community practice, public policy, and private markets. So why focus on building assets? More and more research points to the deficiencies of using income as the sole measure of economic stability. The trend used to be that people did better than the generation before them, but compared to their parents, just as many Americans are downwardly mobile in today's economy as are upwardly mobile. For example, according to the Pew Economic Mobility Project, more than 40% of Americans raised in the bottom quintile of the family income ladder remain stuck there as adults, and 70% remain below the middle. In the early 1990s, CFED and many others were inspired by researcher Michael Sheridan's asset-based approach to poverty alleviation. And Sheridan's essential insight was that assets matter economically, socially, and psychologically in ways that income alone does not. Research shows that assets also can increase a family's resiliency in the face of economic hardship, improve success in the labor market, promote long-term thinking and planning, enhance well-being and life chances of children, increase likelihood of going to and succeeding in college. And so the big takeaway is that it's not just what you earn, but also what you own that matters in achieving financial stability and mobility. So CFED has developed the Household Financial Security Framework to describe what families need to move along the path from financial insecurity to economic opportunity. And the framework has 5 elements: learn, earn, save, invest, and protect, which are all milestones along the path to economic opportunity. The foundation for the framework is what's in the Learn box. so having the knowledge and skills to both succeed in the labor market and also to be able to navigate complex financial markets. The earn box is a shorthand way of talking about the importance of maximizing income. And families can maximize income not only by increasing earnings, but also through the utilization of tax credits and public benefits. The save box focuses on connecting people to the financial mainstream and on creating opportunities to save. This could be both by providing access to basic bank accounts as well as savings incentives, such as match savings accounts known as individual development accounts. So with savings for emergencies and future needs under control, families can then move along the path to the invest box, where they can build long-term assets such as an education, a home, or business. And then finally, the protect box along the bottom emphasizes the importance of both insurance and consumer protections for maintaining the gains made at each step of the way. So before proceeding, I want to recognize that NeighborWorks organizations are already doing asset building, whether it's through financial skills training, tax assistance, providing individual development accounts, home ownership counseling, or foreclosure prevention. NeighborWorks organizations like yours are already helping families learn, earn, save, invest, and protect their assets. So what I want to focus on for the rest of this presentation is how the Assets and Opportunity Network and related resources can help your organization advance the asset building work that you are already doing. So the Assets and Opportunity Network provides an opportunity for your organization to connect to other organizations that are implementing an asset building approach to poverty reduction. The ANO network is both a learning community and a community to educate decision makers about asset building. So its purpose is to both improve members' capacity to deliver asset services and also to foster growth of the assets movement by engaging key decision makers. And the network is made up of a diverse group of organizations. Members include state asset building coalitions, United Ways, community action agencies, and policy think tanks. The network is guided by a steering committee consisting of 11 individuals. There are currently 31 lead state organizations and 30 lead local organizations that serve as the point organizations or conveners for the network. And finally, the network, which officially launched in September of this year, already has over 800 general members from 49 states and the District of Columbia that serve as the foundation of the network. This map shows you where the current lead state and lead local organizations are located. So the orange shading represents states that currently have a lead state organization, while the yellow mark indicates the presence of a lead local organization. So the network does several things. First, it connects the assets field through a virtual infrastructure. And it does this through microsites, network listservs, webinars, action alerts, virtual dialogues, and in-person events that engage members in national conversations about asset building solutions. It also builds members' capacity to participate in the policy process through training on how to educate decision makers about asset building, education on specific policy issues, and also the facilitation of dialogue between decision makers and constituents. The network also builds knowledge of innovative approaches to service delivery through learning groups among members. And it supports members' communication needs by providing advice on how to frame and message various issues. And finally, it provides financial resources for members to attend events such as CFED's biannual Assets Learning Conference and scholarships to gatherings hosted by other organizations. The Assets Learning Conference, which Amy will briefly reflect on during her presentation, is CFED's signature event in the asset building field. And the 2012 conference, which was in September, brought together over 1,200 asset practitioners, policymakers, business people, and researchers. So I want to highlight some of the benefits and opportunities of joining the Assets and Opportunity Network that are related to the network's role as a learning community. First, as a general member, you will have exclusive access to monthly electronic updates that report on latest policy developments. They also highlight upcoming events and opportunities from across the network. Second, as a general member, you can directly share your experiences with peers, and you can raise the visibility of your work nationally via a network blog and via in-person and virtual events and conferences. In addition to the in-person and virtual topical trainings, general members can participate in learning groups. And these learning groups are time-limited, thematically based small groups that learn from each other. Next, through network events, such as the Assets Learning Conference that I met and virtual dialogue, general members can participate in national conversations about solutions and priorities for the assets field. General members also are eligible for scholarships to in-person events, as well as scholarships to events hosted by other organizations. And membership also provides you access to monthly communications and messaging tips around issues important to the network. So this could be key messages that respond to an issue in the news, or perhaps a sample op-ed to tailor and submit to local press, or advice on strategies for leveraging social media. Finally, all general members have access to technical assistance from CFPB staff to help you and interpret and leverage state-level outcome and policy data from CFPB's Assets and Opportunity Scorecard. And the Assets and Opportunity Scorecard is CFPB's signature resource on state outcome and policy data, offering the most comprehensive look available at Americans' financial security today and their opportunities to create a better future. So the scorecard can play an important role in educating decision makers and your partners about the financial security of the families you serve. The scorecard explores how well residents are faring in the 50 states and the District of Columbia. And the latest version of the scorecard, which will be updated in January of 2013, assesses states across 101 outcome and policy measures across 5 issue areas: financial assets and income, businesses and jobs, housing and home ownership, healthcare, and education. So let's take a look at some of the outcome data available in the scorecard at the national level. The main takeaway from the scorecard is that no matter how you measure it, poverty in America is increasing. In 2011, the country saw the official poverty rate rise to the highest level in nearly 2 decades. 14% of households are poor. However, the official poverty rate only highlights one aspect of household finances, and that is the percent of the population with insufficient income to cover day-to-day expenses. It doesn't account for other resources such as money in the bank or assets such as a home or a car that a family has to meet emergencies or longer-term needs. And by this measure, substantially more people in the U.S. are facing financial insecurity. According to the scorecard, 27% of households, which is nearly double the percentage of the population that is income poor, are in asset poverty. Asset poor means that these families do not have savings or other assets to cover basic expenses for 3 months if a layoff or other emergency leads to loss of income. And since the release of the 2009 scorecard, the number of asset poor families increased by 21%. So from about 1 in 5 families to 1 in 4 families that are asset poor. For the first time, the scorecard also includes a measure of what we call liquid asset poverty, which excludes assets such as a home, business, or car that can't easily be converted to cash. And so it provides a more realistic picture of the resources a family actually has to meet emergency needs. 43% of households, which is equivalent to 127.5 million people nationwide, are liquid asset poor, with little or no savings to fall back on in an emergency. This story is also particularly disturbing for households of color, who are more than 2 times as likely as white households to be asset poor, so 44% compared with 20% respectively. And a shockingly high proportion of households of color are also liquid asset poor, 65% compared with 34% of white households. So what influences these 101 outcome measures? First, intergenerational transfer of financial and social assets, or the lack thereof, sets the starting line and directly influences an individual's ability to take advantage of opportunities to build financial security and wealth. Similarly, a family's connection to the financial mainstream determines whether they have access to safe and affordable financial products, or if instead they rely on high-cost fringe financial services that can strip income and wealth. But public policy also plays a critical role in shaping outcomes for families. And in terms of policy, the U.S. has a long history of subsidizing asset building. So let's consider some historical policies such as the Homestead Act, GI bills, the 30-year mortgage, as well as some current policies such as home mortgage deductions and tax-preferred retirement savings. All of these policies are examples of government-supported wealth building. But policy has been uneven and inconsistent. And in many cases, even as the government subsidizes asset building for middle and upper income households, it restricts opportunities for low income households and historically for communities of color. And this is because much of the way that government helps build assets is through tax deductions. But if you don't make enough money to have a tax liability, these incentives are no help. And for very low income families who receive direct government assistance, policies actually penalize savings and asset ownership by implementing asset limits. And these asset limits force low-income families to spend down their savings to be eligible for public benefits. So how uneven is the distribution of government asset building subsidies? Well, CFED did research in 2010 that looked at the amount of asset building subsidies that go to people at various incomes. And this chart shows just how upside down it is. A family earning $1 million a year gets almost $100,000 back in asset subsidies. In many parts of the country, that's enough to buy a pretty nice house. But now let's look at the rest of the distribution. A family earning at around the poverty level only gets back $26, which is clearly not enough to buy a house, but maybe just enough to feed your family for a day. Maybe. So given the important role that public policy plays in achieving financial security, the Assets and Opportunity Scorecard not only focuses on outcomes, but also state-level policies that help move families along a path from financial insecurity to economic opportunity. And these policies help people learn financial skills and build human capital, help them increase earnings and maximize public benefits, help them save for emergencies in the future, help families invest in assets that generate wealth and income, and help protect gains made with access to insurance and by avoiding predatory practices. So this is the household financial security framework we saw earlier. And the scorecard assesses states on 12 policies that are organized along the household financial security framework. So within the learn category, the scorecard assesses how well states integrate financial education in schools and provide access to quality K through 12 education. Within the earn category, the scorecard assesses whether the state offers tax credits for working families, like the earned income tax credit, and whether the state has increased job quality standards. Within the save category, the scorecard assesses whether states remove that disincentive to save by lifting asset limits in public benefit programs, as well as how well states encourage savings by funding state IDA programs and providing college savings incentives. Within the invest category, the scorecard looks at how well states support micro-enterprises and assist first-time home buyers. And finally, within the protect category, the scorecard looks at how well states protect consumers from predatory short-term loans, prevent and protect against foreclosure, and improve access to health insurance. So for each of these policies, the scorecard identifies 4 criteria for what strong policy looks like, and then assesses each state's policies against those criteria. This map sums up policy ratings of each of those 12 specific policies to give a composite picture of the overall strength of states' financial security and opportunity. So some of the states at the top of the list are New York, New Jersey, Vermont, Connecticut, Maine, and Oregon. And at the bottom are Alabama, Nevada, West Virginia, and Mississippi. So to summarize, the scorecard provides a framework for you to understand the comprehensive needs of families. It also provides you the case-making data that can be used both for coalition building and also for educating decision makers. It provides a model for what states can do to help families achieve financial security. And because of its annual release, it provides an opportunity for collective action around asset building issues. I would like to turn it over now to Amy Williamson, who is the Special Projects Coordinator at Mutual Housing California, which, as I said before, is a NeighborWorks organization that is currently serving as an Assets and Opportunity lead local organization in Sacramento. Amy, as the Special Project Coordinator, Amy manages and promotes resident leadership development at 16 affordable housing communities in Sacramento and Yolo counties. And she conducts research and fundraising, management and communication tasks for various projects for both the management team and for the community organizers who work directly with residents in her communities. And Amy is going to share with us why her organization decided to join the Assets and Opportunity Network, and then we will conclude with the specific details about how you can join the Assets and Opportunity Network. Amy?
Hi, Jennifer, thank you. And hello to my NeighborWorks colleagues who are listening in. I just wanted to say really briefly that many of you know our organization as Sacramento Yolo Mutual Housing. We just changed our name to Mutual Housing California a few weeks ago because we are looking to expand to new counties here in Northern California, and we didn't want to keep adding county names to our title, so we just simplified it to Mutual Housing California, so that's who we are. So many of you may already be familiar with us. So I'm going to talk today about our long history with asset building work, what we used to do, how we've kind of changed it over the years, and how being involved with the Assets and Opportunities Network makes a lot of sense for our mission and also for our relationships with other similar-minded organizations here in the Sacramento area. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, so the mission of Mutual Housing is to develop and operate permanently affordable housing that builds strong and stable communities through resident participation and leadership development. We've been around since 1988, and we've had that same mission the entire time. So it's basically a two-part mission. We build the housing, and then we work directly with our residents on leadership development. So a lot of NeighborWorks organizations are different than other affordable housing organizations in that we don't just call it resident services. We don't just have things that are helping folks get by from day to day, although that is part of what we do. But our ultimate aim is to help our residents build the capacity to make long-term improvements in their own lives and in their communities. So, however, we know that in order to be able to engage with that kind of work, we need to also help them to create some stability. So we've had for many, many years an understanding that helping people to sort of address financial crises and gain some kind of financial stability, going through that process is a way of developing personal leadership for the communities that we work with, the individuals and families. And so once they gain that stability, then they are able to get involved with the community types of leadership that we work with people around. How can we make our mutual housing community a better place? Do we need more lights? Do we need more neighborhood watch to improve safety? But then also looking outside the borders of our mutual housing community, do we need to get involved with things locally in our jurisdictions to improve opportunities for ourselves and then for others as well. So we understand that these levels of leadership, personal leadership and community leadership are very connected. And so our director, who's been our director for many, many years, has always understood that, and it has helped staff to understand that as well. So many of you may be familiar in the mid to late 90s. That's sort of the era that Jennifer was alluding to earlier, when many people were excited about Michael Sheridan's ideas about new ways to alleviate poverty. And that was the time when IDA programs really became very popular and well tried out and well researched and funded at that time. So in 1998, Mutual Housing was able to get some funding from NeighborWorks to start an IDA program. At that time, I personally worked for Mercy Housing here in Sacramento, and we were doing the same thing. We started an IDA program as well. Quickly, after about a year or so, we decided it was kind of silly for us to be managing these independently, so we kind of merged them at the time. So we managed that in-house. I was the coordinator of that collaborative, which many other nonprofits joined in as well over the years. So from about 98 to 2005, that's what I was doing. I was managing financial education and asset building programs for Mutual Housing and other organizations. During that time, it turned into quite a large collaborative. In 2005, I actually left personally and went on to other life adventures for a time, and the programs continued for a couple of years. Despite our organization's commitment to asset building, it isn't really the core of our mission. As I mentioned before, we build affordable housing and do leadership development. And when times are lean, as you all know that they were for everybody in 2007 to 2009 especially, it was tough to maintain some of those programs. Funding was less available, and we just kind of had to pare down to what was necessary. And so those programs sort of phased out during that time and weren't existing for a couple of years. And that was the case for Mutual Housing, but also for our community in general, I would say. So in 2009, as some of you may also be familiar with, NeighborWorks began a AmeriCorps Vista pilot program through which they sent Vista volunteers to various NeighborWorks organizations around the country to address various issues that had come up in these lean years: foreclosure prevention, community revitalization and stabilization, and financial education. So our director, Rachel Isco, thought, well, this is a great way for us to kind of rethink a new way for us to do this kind of asset building work, but perhaps not to do it in-house like we used to in the previous years. So her idea was to bring in the Vistas and have them identify other folks in the community here who had the capacity to do financial education and asset building work. So for us not to be the lead on that anymore, but to find partners that we could work with and do that. So in 2009, we became part of that NeighborWorks Vista demonstration, and we continue with that through till today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. So you can move on to the next slide now. So a lot of what the Vistas have worked on over the last few years is identifying those key partners, having them come out to our communities and do various types of workshops and follow-up activities with folks, and figuring out who were the really strong partners and who we didn't really want to work with anymore, frankly. So we've kind of narrowed down to the folks who are passionate and capable about those issues. So we've had a lot of activity going on in that area at our sites through partnerships. So when in 2011, CFED announced that they were going to be starting this Assets and Opportunities Network, keeping up with these things as I do because I have this long history of interest in these issues. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized I forgot to explain that I came back to Mutual Housing in 2010. That's how I got back involved with all this work after taking some time off to do other things. So I was back at this point when this was announced, and I was supervising the Vistas who were rebuilding this work. So when I saw this announcement that this network was forming, I thought, oh, this is great. Who here in Sacramento should be the lead local organization for the network? And so I started calling around to some of the partners that we had. And a lot of them were really in the same position that we are now, which is that even though they're very passionate about asset building, it's not really the core of their mission or of their focus. And so they weren't quite in a position to be able to apply or to want to apply for that designation. So I talked to Rachel, and we decided that we would go ahead and apply to be the lead local organization because we really wanted Sacramento to be represented in this network. So we were very honest in our application to CFED, and we said, we really feel like there's not a clear leader in this area. Because of our past experience in this area, we're going to step up and do this, but we may think about transferring that to someone in the future, because that is one of the possibilities in the network, is that it is a transferable designation if things change and different organizations' priorities change. So that was sort of how we went into it, was, well, let's do this and see who we can get to do it later as we develop our collaborative to the next level. So we went along sort of with that mindset for a while, and then we found out earlier this year that part of the benefit of being part of the network is that you get a scholarship, and actually you get 2 scholarships to the Assets Learning Conference, which just happened this past September. So there's 1 scholarship for a person from the member organization to attend, and then you also get a 2nd scholarship with which you can bring a key community partner that's part of your asset building coalition. So this was very exciting. So I was able to attend the conference with one of our key partners, and it was an extremely inspiring event. Like Jennifer said, there were 1,200 people there, and you could really feel the national energy in the room around asset building issues. Cory Booker was there and gave a great speech. You can see it on YouTube, but you kind of had to be in the room to get the full effect. It was just very exciting on that sort of national energy level. But then in the workshops themselves, there were lots of concrete examples of local coalitions and how they had formed. And so it really got me thinking, maybe we can, be a key part of the leadership team in this after all. Maybe we can hang on to this status as lead local organization and just engage some of the strongest partners that we've made here in the community and build something that engages even more organizations to work together to promote more, bring more funding into the community for these kinds of opportunities, and to increase awareness about the kinds of issues that surround it, kind of the statistics that Jennifer was sharing with you, specific to our community here. So I came back really fired up from the conference, and so I reached out, and I've got listed here some of the key partners. There was a woman here from Citibank here in our region who's very interested in asset building, and she was at the conference as well. So I reached out to her, and then our United Way here in Sacramento and our Goodwill. Opening Doors is actually a refugee resettlement organization that's moved quite a lot into small business development and asset development in general, and has been doing a lot of financial education in various languages. And then our ClearPoint Credit Counseling organization, which ClearPoint is a national nonprofit credit counseling organization that has been involved with asset building coalitions in lots of different communities. So those were the strong partners that I reached out to, and so we've been meeting ever since September to talk about how we can really build a strong coalition here in Sacramento. So that brings up the next slide. So we have planned a local forum for here in Sacramento on December 10th with many local leaders. And we are planning to do an activity based on Goodwill's matrix that they have developed around the labor market and financial capability. And it's a really cool matrix that they have. It basically, on one axis, it talks about people who are in crisis all the way up to thriving. So there are about 5 stages in between there. And then on the other axis is various areas, kind of like the household financial security framework that Jennifer was mentioning. It talks about housing, healthcare, education, those different areas. And so what we're going to do with this activity is figure out who at the forum is working in each space in that matrix. So who's working with people from crisis to move them toward a little bit more stability, and then who's working more on the high end, I guess you could call it, of moving from stability to thriving. And how can we encourage these different partners in the community to align with each other and to collaborate more, and then also trying to figure out what are the gaps here in terms of financial capability and asset building, and how can we as a coalition really work together to fill those gaps. One of them, does happen to be IDAs. We don't have IDAs here in Sacramento anymore, and so that's something that we're interested in figuring out how to bring back. So that's something we're planning and doing here locally. Also, the cool thing about the Assets and Opportunities Network is that we also have our statewide organization, lead state organization is the designation. And our lead state organization here in California is sponsoring a statewide forum on December 4th in Fresno that's going to bring together folks kind of like us who are doing all of these things from around the state. And so it'll be kind of like a mini version of the DC Assets Learning Conference. So we're excited about that since it's going to be focused specifically on our state. There was an article in this a little bit of an aside, but there was an article in our local paper today about the new federal poverty measure and how California basically has the highest rate of poverty of all states based on this new federal measure. So it's a big issue here for us. So we're excited about these upcoming events. There's a lot of energy going on, a lot of participation and interest. And what I wanted to add one final note, because this is something that I've been talking about with the coalition that we're building here in Sacramento, just as a guiding principle, because we really want to keep grounded in our mission here at Mutual Housing, because we feel like it sets a good example for all these types of efforts as they emerge, which is that we really want leadership development to be a focus. So we don't want to necessarily build something from above and sort of descend it down onto the community. We really want as much as possible for families who are interested in these issues to be part of the planning process. So I just kind of put through a resource in here for you all to look at as a model for this, which is the Family Independence Initiative, which is based in San Francisco, but they have programs in various cities all across the country, including Hawaii. And they've done this model where basically instead of predetermining how they're going to promote asset development and financial security, they have sought out natural community groups. So whether through churches or through neighborhoods, they've found groups of community leaders, and they've given them a very loose structure for them to figure out, well, what are our challenges, what are our goals, what are our dreams, and what resources are we missing, what information do we not have, what do we need to do to figure out how to overcome the challenges that we have toward getting toward those goals. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind through all this type of planning work, and so I wanted to share that model with all of you, because we're using it to guide what we're doing here. So that is us. You know, like I said, we got into the network a little bit casually almost, but after having been to the conference, you know, we're very excited about the role, and we definitely encourage other NeighborWorks organizations to think about how they can get involved either through partnerships that they already have or partnerships that they may be seeking out in the community, because there are a lot of resources that it brings and a lot of energy and excitement. So I'm glad that we've done it, and I hope that more NeighborWorks organizations will choose to do the same. And that's all, unless there are questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. I think it's just really valuable to hear a firsthand account of the value that you saw and that your organization saw in joining the Assets and Opportunity Network, and particularly how it very much does relate to the mission of NeighborWorks organizations, as you said, in terms of cultivating that leadership and financial self-sufficiency. So thank you so much for that. Before we turn to questions, I do want to provide you with some specific details about how to join the Assets and Opportunity Network. And I first would encourage you to join as a general member. And as a general member, you will have access to information via a monthly e-update where we provide the latest policy developments. Your work will be, the visibility of your work will be raised nationally through our network blog. And you also will have access to assistance interpreting and leveraging the data that we've presented via the Assets and Opportunity Scorecard. Another way to connect with the network is to connect with the lead state or local organization in your area. And you can find your lead state or local organization by visiting the Assets and Opportunity Network page, and I've included the link here. Every 6 months or so, the network solicits letters of interest for organizations that are interested in serving as a lead state or local organization. So if your state currently does not have a lead state organization, I would certainly encourage you to think about applying. And then if your state does have a lead state organization, but you're in a town or city or municipality that does not have a local organization, I would also encourage you to apply as a lead local. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions. Again, you can submit your questions by going to the Submit a Question box on the GoToWebinar frame. And it looks like we have a couple of questions that have come in already. So let's see. Amy, this looks like a question for you. Do you have any recommendations for how to seek out partners that might be able to provide financial education or other asset building services to our clients if we also don't have the capacity to provide it in-house?
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, there's a lot of different possibilities there. So One of them clearly is financial institutions, because they are required to do, community work to get their CRA credits. A lot of, I shouldn't say just because of that. Some of them actually are very passionate about doing this work regardless of that requirement. So I would seek out the financial institutions. I would even start with the ones that your organization has a relationship with in the first place. That's how we got started back in '98. We actually worked with the bank that was holding our accounts as an organization and kind of branched out from there. So financial institutions are very interested in this work. Some local communities have financial education specific nonprofits. It is the minority, I would say, these days, but like in San Francisco, there's EARN, and in DC there's Capital Area Asset Builders, and several other cities have organizations that focus on providing education. Community action agencies, some cities even have financial empowerment centers, and that was something that was talked about quite a lot at the Assets Learning Conference, which actually, I don't know, Jennifer, if you know it offhand, but the website for the Assets Learning Conference has a lot of great resources on it that might have even specific links so that people could search. EITC coalitions, Earned Income Tax Credit, Tax Season coalitions, credit counseling nonprofits, all the types of organizations that I mentioned, those are all potential places to look for that kind of resource.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Okay, another question that we have coming in is how do practitioners and members of the Assets and Opportunity Network use the scorecard data that you've presented? Well, I can answer that at first, and then I certainly welcome Amy if you want to add anything about how you've used the data in your community. I think there's many different ways that you can use the scorecard data. One, of course, is to educate decision makers and your partners. One resource that's available on the Assets and Opportunity Scorecard webpage is the option to download a 4-page state-specific profile, which provides the outcome measures for those 5 issue areas: the financial assets and income, the businesses and jobs, healthcare, education, and home ownership. And so it presents the outcome measures as well as the recommended policy measures associated with each of those issue areas. And this is a resource that you can print and share with decision makers in your community as well as partners to provide a picture of how well the residents in your particular state are faring. Other members of the network have used the scorecard to attract media attention in their area, particularly around the time of the scorecard release. So every January we release new scorecard data, and we work with the lead state and the lead local organizations to develop a strategy or a media plan to leverage that data to get media attention in the area. Last year's release, we had media coverage in all of the 50 states, including in the District of Columbia. And we also had national coverage of the release in the Huffington Post, in the Chicago Tribune, and also NPR. And then I would just add finally that people use the scorecard to raise the awareness of asset poverty both in a local and a national conversations. And so the goal being to move the discussion about poverty away from just looking at income as an indicator of how families are doing and towards the incorporation of asset poverty as an important measure to understand the lack of economic security that American families are experiencing. But Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything about how you have used the scorecard data in the past.
Well, actually, for us, it's the future. It's going to be the future. So we haven't really used it to date. What we've talked about in our emerging coalition is that we really want to work a little bit more at the grassroots level, first of interested nonprofits and financial institutions, to build a coalition and a track record of some activity around asset building program and success. And then we're sort of planning to move up to the level of engaging policymakers and getting some media attention for what we've done and what we hope to do into the future years. So we will definitely be using the data at that time when we are at that phase of the campaign.
Excellent. One other question that came in is whether these the recording of this webinar is going to be posted online, and the answer is yes, it will be posted both on CFED's website as well as the NeighborWorks website. Let's see. Amy, this looks like a question for you. Maybe just what were some of the key takeaways from the Assets Learning Conference? Talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if you want to add anything more in response to this question.
Sure. Well, for me, the key takeaway was just energy, and I guess the sense it was almost as if I sort of had a leadership development experience myself, because I used to manage these types of programs, and then I moved away from it for a long time, and I came back, and I haven't really had the time or space to focus on it because I have so many other responsibilities in the organization. But after just being in the room with so many people who have accomplished so many great things in this area, I realized, I really need to take a step up and ask for that time. And I had a feeling that I would get it, and I have. So that was the key takeaway. I mean, as far as other specific things, it was more just being in these workshops where people from nonprofits and financial institutions and the consultants that they worked with really broke down the process that they used to develop coalitions. And that was really inspiring to not just feel the energy to do it, but also to learn some strategies for doing that. And again, I think on the Assets Learning Conference site, some of the presentations from those workshops are there for anybody to learn from. So I encourage you to check those out.
Great, thank you, Amy. And I would just echo that it's not only a very inspirational event, but it is an opportunity to connect with so many different people working in the asset building field. And so while your organization might have its niche or policy or program area that it wants to focus on, the conference offers you an opportunity to connect with people that are working in all different areas. So it looks like we have one more question. Although I certainly encourage you to write in additional questions if you have them. This question is, what if my organization is interested in serving as a lead state organization, but my state already has a lead state organization? So as I mentioned, every 6 months or so, the network issues a request for letters of interest for both lead state and lead local organizations. And the term that the organization serves for is 2 years. So every 2 years, there is the opportunity for a new organization to step into that role of lead state organization. With that said, the network really does defer to the key stakeholders on the ground to determine which organization is best positioned to serve that role. So if the organization that has been serving as the lead state organization wants to continue and has, excelled in that role, we would certainly encourage them to continue. But really, the process is more of a dialogue before applying. That there's a dialogue among organizations in the state to determine which organization would be best positioned to serve in that role.